Push Too Far with Mike Brown, president of Trico Homes. Today on Behind the Book, that's what we're talking about. Let's jump in. I'm Heather Andrews, and on Behind the Book, we journey beyond the cover. On each episode, I dive deep into the minds of authors, unlocking the mysteries behind their literary creations. Discover the stories behind the book exclusively here with me. Welcome back to Behind the Book. Last episode with Mike Brown, president of Trico, we talked about doing well by doing good. But today, we're going to talk about push too far. Welcome back, Mike.
No, it's good to be here again.
Excellent. So when we talk about push too far, I know that there's a story around that because we were talking about it before. So can you just give us a little bit of what that looked like for you, push too far, and what that means?
It's interesting because the story is about really centered on my kids. And, I'm always, as you do with your kids, you're always pushing. And you're always saying, you can do more, you can do more, you do more. And when they're going through it, it's painful. But then the end is they're like, oh, that was good. Yeah. It's very similar in business. And I find that as leaders, we're very fortunate because our owner is an entrepreneur. And so an entrepreneur is that they just don't sit still. They're going all the time. And I have a little bit of that in me as well. And I think when I think about push too far, I often think is about how do you stretch the team, and how do you stretch? So we think about it as our business. We're a growing business. We've gone in the last 10 years from being a home builder to now we have rental properties, we have a seniors residence, we have a restaurant, we have a gym, we have all these different things. That's pushing, that's stretching. And sometimes you got to circle back to the staff on the culture side is like, how do you ensure you kind of keep that secret sauce, right? You can keep doing that, but you still got to be consistent to who you are.
Absolutely.
And I've found in my experience, I've had a lot of learnings over the last few years in terms of, the need to circle back. As a leader, you oftentimes say, well, it's, it makes good sense. We're going to go over here. Like, everybody should understand why I want to go over here, why we want to do this, why Wayne wants to do this. And really, as a leader, it's important to connect the dots for people. We got to go backwards and connect those dots and explain why it makes sense for us. Like, you think about if you're a superintendent that's working in single-family construction, you're like, well, we're going to open a restaurant. It's like, why are you opening a restaurant? Why aren't you just doing more single-family construction? Mm-hmm. You actually have to tell the story. You actually have to connect with people and tell them why you're doing what you're doing. Absolutely,
and that brings up a really good point in when we come into culture, right? And connecting those dots and telling people why. And why it's important, because a lot of times companies will plunge forward and not give that reasoning or have that conversation, and people just are honestly they build resistance or mutiny on the bounty.
They do. They do. Well, it's change, and change has different impacts on different people. And the tough part is, I've always found it's I embrace change. I like change as an individual. The harder the day, the better I am. Yeah. My wife oftentimes said, "You like the grind. Yeah. You like to be difficult." But then you have other people that work for you. It's like they want the predictability. They want to have the same day every day, and they do good work for you. They're key part of your team. And if you don't circle back with them, and I'll talk to you a little bit about circling back. Yeah. So oftentimes I used to think as a leader, president, and then I have my direct reports. As long as you keep your direct reports on side, everybody else will follow. What I've learned through time is you actually have to reach down within the organization and connect with more people, have a relationship with. Like in my team itself, we have 160 plus people. I need to have some version of a relationship with those 160 people. Now, I can't have it with everybody, but I need to have it because ultimately, at the end of the day, I'm the one that can complete that story for them. I can't count on my direct reports to do that. I have to do a lot of that work. And, one of the things I do is every week, every 2 weeks, I have somebody from one of the 160 come in and meet with me, kind of take me through what are they worried about, what's going on, tell me about themselves, tell them about their history. And it makes a huge difference for me in terms of my decision making, but it also gives me a sense of, okay, are they really on side with us? Because people will change with some people. They become quite entrenched. It's like, no, I will do this. This will be my day. I'm going to do this today. And when you're trying to stretch people, it's tough. It's tough on them.
Yeah, it is tough to stretch when you're used to a certain way and a certain... And I think the other thing too that when you talked about is like when you go back and you say why. I love the fact that you bring people into your office and have those conversations. I know when I was in corporate, I had a chair in my corner, and I basically said at our corporate meetings, I said that chair is for you.
Yes.
And I had one girl, and she was like highly stressed. She got when the day went sideways, but she also had a very stressful job. She was in front of the people. She was dealing with all of the difficult situations in in that office.
Yeah.
And it's healthcare, so,
Yeah.
you know,
Oh,
which is,
absolutely.
you know,
Yeah.
but I had that chair there, and I said, if anyone at any point needs to have that, whether you come in, you sit down, you close the door, it's your safe space.
Yeah.
I said, I don't care if you talk to me, but
come here.
that's your space.
Good for you.
You know, now we weren't a 30-foot building either. Like, we were a one floor clinic of, you know, 100 people, but at least they knew that was there.
Well, and you have to, and it's tough too, because you can say, I found this in my experience too. You can say, I have an open door policy. Not everybody's comfortable with an open door policy.
Yeah.
Like, and so that's where I got into, is I actually have to pick, and I'm pretty selective who I pick. It's usually in areas that I think there's maybe some problems or some challenges, and but the scary thing is, if you do it, so when I started at Trico, it was kind of like, if I model certain behaviors, I believe everybody else would do that. When I learned that that's not the case.
Yeah.
You can model it all you want. You actually have to have a dialogue with people. And then I figured out, okay, I got to work farther down in the organization. I have to drive out to the field, connect with guys in the field, in their space, not in my space, but in their space.
Yeah.
And then doing so, I learned really quickly in terms of what's really going on with people's head and the pressures they have in life. You know, we oftentimes only think about the stress of work.
Right.
They have life stress. And if you can show some empathy towards that life stress, and at least understanding and recognize where they're at on their own personal growth, it goes a long way.
Well, that story, that life stress story, it empathy, right?
Yep.
And as a publisher of many stories,
Absolutely.
you know, I've heard many stories about what's really kind of where people, the things that they go through outside of that day-to-day work. And it's amazing how resilient our human spirit is. And,
Absolutely.
And when I think we push too far, there's being pushed too far, and then there's the pushing too far. And, you know, it's kind of a, you know, twofold statement. So it's got to, you know.
It's true. I've always had a piece where when I work for people is if they can, you know, well, I'll be in a position where you're boss, and we all have, everyone has a boss.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You know, like I work for Wayne worked for a bank, or everybody's got their boss. But if the boss can explain to you why they think the way they do, you don't necessarily have to agree with it, but at least if you understand it, you'll execute on it. It's when somebody tells you just something, you're like, this makes no sense.
Yeah.
There's like, this is completely off. I'm not going to do this. That's where you struggle, and that's where I've always struggled as an individual. I just need to understand why.
Yeah.
And once I understand the why, I can execute.
Yeah.
And I would say in the last 4 years, when I understood that in terms of the team, that I need to articulate that beyond the people that I see on the everyday basis,
Yeah.
it was a lot more effective.
Well, that's awesome. That's so good. Thank you for explaining all of that, because
No.
there's like lots of different, you know, multitudes. And it's beautiful having like the president of Trico Homes with us, because we often don't hear on Behind the Book, because so many of the authors were business owners.
Yeah.
And, you know, whereas you're coming at it from that, you know, it's, you know, you're working for the company, with the company, and you're at that level. So it's really interesting perspective to come on from that president perspective. So thank you for sharing all of that.
No, appreciate it.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Excellent. So when we think about push too far, I'm going to kind of just deviate a little bit. When you decided to come in and write your chapter in Culture Revolution, did that push you, writing that chapter, did that push you in some way out of your comfort zone?
Yeah, I did. I had a fulsome conversation. So it's interesting because we all have business coaches or different people to connect to, and so the one thing that my comfort zone is I don't like talking about myself.
There you go.
So that's and so when you get into telling your story, and I think it's a pretty cool story, and I've been lucky because I've worked in different companies, but you just everybody gets stretched, and for me that was a stretch. Just go through. I knew the story of Wayne. I knew. It was interesting. I'm very comfortable talking about the story of Wayne. I'm not as comfortable talking about the story of Mike. And so it was kind of like, okay, how do you connect this all together? But it was very cool because I think that's one of the mistakes we make as people is we don't reflect on our past enough and actually realize how, you know, we all have amazing stories.
Yes.
And so it's not even the telling of the story, it's just stopping and looking back and saying, oh, I remember when you did this. And that's actually really empowering. You know?
Yeah. So would you say that you learned a lot about Mike in the process?
I learned, I felt there was a connection between me and Trico in terms of values from the very beginning, but I didn't realize how aligned it was. And when we went through, like even, you know, we talked in the last episode about COVID. We're going through COVID. I didn't realize, you know, all the different things, the thinking that we did. And like I knew we lived our values, I knew we connected to our values, I knew all those, but I didn't really realize, one, you didn't realize how hard it was, and then the second is that you actually did overcome.
That's awesome. No, your chapter turned out really well because you did a really excellent job of weaving the story of Trico, the value of Trico, the culture of Trico, and then you weaved your own story in there as well. And it was just overall, it was just a really impactful chapter of really like, this is a company that's been here for 20 some years, and this is kind of what they've adhered to, and this is what it's kind of like the outcome of good culture.
It is. It's a product. That's our product, actually.
Yeah, and that was just, it really wrapped up the book.
Oh, very good.
Really,
I'm glad. I hope the readers really enjoy it. So.
Yeah, and what is the wish for your reader as they read your chapter in the book?
I think we all have our stories. I think the piece for when you look at Trico is I want somebody to look at it and recognize that you can be the exception. You can, if you have a greater purpose in mind, that's actually really cool, and you can actually really leverage that greater purpose and do. I know for myself is just, I hope it's empowering when they look at somebody like me and say, well, okay, you've done all these different things and you've been able to do that, and it looks like you're doing well, Mike, and if you and realize that the potential is unlimited. People can go where they want to go. It's I have younger kids right now, and they're in university and high school, and everything's set on you're going to do this for the rest of your life, and I don't believe that to be the case.
Yeah.
You control your destiny. You control the path that you're on.
That's beautiful. I love that. And as we wrap up this episode, where can people find you?
People can find me, go to LinkedIn, search Michael Brown, Trico Homes, and reach out, and I'd love to connect.
Thank you, Mike, for being on the show today. Thank you to our listener. And as we talked about today, we talked about push too far, but stay tuned for our next episode with Mike as we talk about beyond the personal limit. Stay tuned for the next episode of Behind the Book with Mike Brown. It's been a literary voyage here on Behind the Book. My sincerest thanks to our featured authors for letting us peek behind the curtain. I'm Heather Andrews, urging you to keep exploring the vast universe of literature. Until our next chapter, happy reading.